Listen up, this is a Porsche Macan GTS, and it's the quickest and sportiest Macan Porsche currently makes. And in this review, I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on its twin-turbo motor, its updated styling, and take it for a quick drive. So let's get started with this review of the Porsche Macan GTS. Starting off the review with a big thank you to Porsche of downtown LA for giving me access to this Macan GTS today. If you happen to be interested in a Macan or any other new or pre-owned Porsche product, send me a message on Instagram and I'll make sure you get taken care of. Now let's start it off with the interior of the Macan GTS, because when Porsche gave the Macan a refresh, the interior is where it saw the most drastic change as far as its styling goes. Now, I drove a Macan Turbo, of course, when it existed. Now it doesn't, because the GTS is the top of the line in the Macan lineup. This center area here was filled with buttons, and it was falling out of line with what Porsche was doing with basically every other interior styled Porsche product. Hence, this center section is now basically all LCD lit pseudo type buttons. It's clean, it's nice, easy to read, and it's modern looking, and it is again in line with what they're doing in basically all of their other Porsche products. Now, I know that there's a button gang out there that says, no, I want the buttons back, give me the buttons. But let me know in the comments, are you a button type person in an infotainment or in the center climate control system, or do you like the new modern way of cars or interior styling with these touch capacitive LCD lit style buttons? Now let's switch on over into the overall size and the interior of the Macan. And even though this is a compact SUV, it's very tricky, because this is actually a great size SUV. I'm 5'11", and I have plenty of headroom on top of me. The overall width and the greenhouse in here is fantastic. Hence why I say it's tricky, because when you look at it from the outside, you think, oh, compact SUV. It's actually rather large in here. And as I was saying, 5'11", my seat is not even in its lowest position. Somebody several inches taller will be able to fit in here just fine. As far as the seat and the overall comfort, this is the 18-way seat. It's a wonderful, wonderful seat, the 18-way from Porsche. It has several ways to expand and contract the thighs and the side bolsters. It holds you in wonderfully. The cushioning is great. It's a wonderful, wonderful seat to sit in. You can get them heated and cooled, which this one is as a part of the premium package, but of course you can get them a la carte as well. Let's switch over into the technology. So this is another area where Porsche gave the Macan some changes, and I'm a little mixed with this, and let me explain. So the good about the infotainment system, it's a 10.9-inch screen. The design is nicely executed. It sits and blends in very nicely with the dash, and the overall infotainment system itself is, I believe, PCM 5. It's not the newest version, which is the simpler, updated version, and I'm surprised to see that it's not in this newer Macan, because the newer version of PCM is a lot simpler. And it's not to say that this prior version is any bad. I actually like this version as well, but the new one is a little bit better. So hence my mixed feeling there. But this PCM 5 system is great as well. You have the ability to move around and customize things in the center section here, and you have shortcut keys running along the left-hand side of the screen, and it's very, very simple and easy to use. The learning curve, I would say, is short to maybe moderate, depending on how you like to interact with your infotainment system. Now, as far as some of the other amenities, storage is actually really nice. The glove compartment is good. The map pockets are good. You do have a center storage area right here. Speaking of the center storage area, you have two USB Type-C charging outlets, and it seems like there's also a wireless charger. This does have a panoramic roof. It is optional. I like panoramic roofs because they make the interior a lot more open or feel that way, and the rear seat passengers have something to look out of, so it's really cool. Speaking of the rear seat passengers, now let's go to the back seats and I'll tell you what it's like back there. So the back seats in the Macan, starting off with the overall size at 5'11". I am sitting behind myself and you can see I have a couple inches of leg room here. As far as headroom goes, my hair is slightly grazing the ceiling area here, but overall really nice sizing. As far as the width goes, can 3 adults fit back here? At least my size? Yeah, I think so. The center section here may be a little constrained. It's always about shoulder room when you sit in the back, so you may have to lean a little bit more towards the window, but 3 children are gonna fit back here just fine. Now, some of the other amenities, this does have an optional sunshade here, which is always wonderful. There is the extended stitching, deviated stitching, which continues on the back seat, kind of really nice, giving it a more luxurious touch, especially on the seats here. The seat cushioning is wonderful, just as good as the ones in the front. There is a third climate control zone here, controlled by this little lever, which is somewhat simple, but again, it does give you that functionality of a third zone. And you also have optional heated seats back here, which are great for your backseat passengers. And of course, that panoramic roof to look out of, very cool. Charging, always important in the back seat. You have 2 USB Type-Cs, so 2 passengers are going to be just fine. If you have 3 children in here, depending on how old they are, of course, now many children, basically everybody's got a connected device, so 2 charging ports. It would have been nice if they put maybe a third 12-volt outlet or something like that to give you another option. Otherwise, very simple. There is a 2 cup holder set up here with a nicely cushioned armrest. So that's basically it on the back seat. Now let's check out the trunk space and see how much cargo room there is in the back of the Macan GTS. All right, now the trunk space in the Macan. So how do you open the trunk? There are multiple ways of doing so. There's a button on the interior, there's a button on the key, and then there's also a unconventionally placed button for comfort access, meaning if you have the key with you, you don't have to take it out, you just push a button. That area is usually right here on top of the license plate, but not in the Macan. It's right here on the rear windshield wiper. So you push this little button here, and after beeping a couple times, the back hatch will open in the Macan, and you'll be greeted with almost 18 cubic feet of space. And I think there's plenty of storage room in the back of the Macan. I could see you fitting 2 larger pieces of suitcases or traveling equipment with you. You can rack and stack and put extra things in here. I can also see somebody being able to fit a stroller in here, so a children's stroller or some other type of wagon. Nowadays, there's so many things to carry around your children. But nonetheless, there's plenty of space in the back of the Macan. If you needed a little bit more space and you didn't have any backseat passengers, you can fold down the rear seats, expanding your total cubic feet or cargo cubic feet to 53. So substantial room in the back of the Macan. Again, surprising that this is a compact SUV with the amount of storage space, with the seats up and also with the seats down. Now, one really cool and convenient feature that the Macan benefits from having an air suspension is the ability to lower this rear section here. And that's done using these 2 buttons. So you push the one down here and it will lower the rear end of your Macan so you can lift things and load them easier. So if you got something heavy, if you've got something taller, it becomes easier. You don't have to lift it as high to put it in the back of your Macan. And once you're done, you push the button and it raises back up to the same position it was before you dropped it down. So that's pretty much it on the trunk. Now let me tell you about some of the exterior changes that Porsche did for the 2022 model year refresh. So remember at the outset I said Porsche made the most drastic changes on the interior. Well, they did tinker with the exterior a little bit, so let's start off with the front end. It looks similar to what you got in the outgoing turbo, but with some more aggressive textured looking materials in the grille. Then out the back you have this more pronounced diffuser wrapping the cool quad tailpipes, and of course those exhaust tips are painted in black to give it a little sportier look for the GTS trim level. And there's also, specific to to this car, additional black trim pieces that I really like the door handles and some of the trimming around the window. But to put it simply, I think the Macan is the best looking car within its segment. So comparing it to the BMW X3, the Audi, some of the other competition that's not coming to me at this moment, I think the Macan is the best looking by a mile. All right, now one area where Porsche didn't really tinker much when they transitioned from the turbo to the GTS being the top trim level is with the motor. This is the same unit that you would have gotten if you went with the Macan Turbo, of course, when it existed, and it is a 2.9 liter twin turbocharged V6 making 434 horsepower and 406 pound-feet of torque. It's made it to a 7-speed PDK transmission, and it's putting power down to all 4 wheels. Now, all of this equates to a 0 to 60 time of 4.3 seconds for the GTS, but if you were to use launch control with the Sport Chrono package, it drops down a couple ticks to 4.1 in this 4,400 pound SUV. Now, because this is the GTS trim level, Porsche is also paying attention to the suspension because this is equipped with air ride with a 10mm lower ride height compared to any other Macan. It's also 15% stiffer than the outgoing turbo. The wheels that they're riding on are 21-inch exclusive Spyder RS designs on all 4 corners. They're by 9.5 up front and 10 inches in the rear. So now let's go around back and take a listen to what this thing sounds like, and then get behind the wheel and see what this thing feels like to drive. Alright, so now the driving portion of the Macan GTS, and this is what the key looks like. Nothing really different other than the fact that it looks like a Macan compared to some other Porsche cars where in a 911 it looks like a 911. But the overall visibility is great in the Macan as well. It feels like a 911 with that fishbowl style interior feel, or outward visibility is probably the better word. It does have blind spot monitors, a rear view camera, and front and rear parking sensors, which gives it an adequate safety net for 2023 standards. Now let's go ahead and turn the ignition on and go for a drive. Remember, if you're new to Porsches, the ignition is on the left hand side, so foot on the brake, turn it to the right, and it wakes up. The exhaust note in the GTS is wonderful at startup. So let's go for a drive, shall we? Release the parking brake. And as you set off in the Macan, even though it's a compact SUV, it still feels like a nice high command driving position. So for those who are apprehensive about, oh, it's a compact, it still feels SUV-ish, for the lack of a better term. Now I'm gonna go ahead and put on some go fast modes. So exhaust on, sport on, and I'm gonna leave it in the normal shock setting, and I'll tell you why here in a second. And I will also put the car in its lowest ride height. Let's not forget to put it in manual shift mode, and let's see what this thing has under some acceleration. So turn on to a straight, and let's give it the beans. Oh, downshifted. Okay, now we're in first, and let's go. Wow, oh, listen to the exhaust note. Brakes are good as well. Brakes are really nice. Downshift. Nice exhaust note in this car. It will not let you bang it off the rev limiter. It will shift it for you, which is convenient, but sometimes people like to bang it off the rev limiter. The Macan, or the PDK in this Macan, will not allow you to do that. So this is a properly quick car. And the exhaust note is wonderful as well, specifically when you have the exhaust mode enabled and in sport mode, because in sport mode you get the backfires and the cracks and the pops from the exhaust note. But from an overall speed standpoint, it is very, very quick. It does feel all of that 4 seconds 0 to 60 time. It's not gonna blow your head off with super, super fast acceleration, but it does give you a proper gut punch. Let's try it again here from a complete stop. Let's go. It does take a second to get up and go, well, at least from a dig, but, oh, does you see the PDK downshifted there by itself? PDK is just wonderful. But the real shove starts at the 4,000 and 4,500 range. Now, the transmission, as I said, the PDK, this is the 7-speed version. There's now an 8-speed version, but the PDK is wonderful. It's well known to be wonderful, and it's no different here in the Macan. Now let's move over into the steering and the suspension. So this has 3 different modes in the shock setting or in the chassis. So there's normal, sport, and sport plus. I found normal to be the best mode to ride in because when you're driving it here around like I am in downtown LA where the roads are not the best, normal mode is the most compliant. And the reason why Sport and Sport Plus feel a little too much, the steering gets a little bit heavier, and I don't really like that. It gives it some artificial feel. And then in these kind of rough city roads, downtown roads, Sport and Sport Plus start to get really, really jittery, especially if you are in the low ride height like I am in now. But here's one thing, if you're in the low ride height and if you're in normal mode for your shock setting, it's still compliant and you can get by. And I say that because I bet you a lot of Porsche Macan owners will put it in the lower ride height because it just looks cooler that way. Now, from an overall standpoint, what do I think of the Macan? I think by itself, this car is wonderful, and for many reasons, but most notably because of its bandwidth. Now, it has an extremely wide bandwidth and reaches on 2 opposite ends of the spectrum here. So on one end, it's comfortable, it has a lot of trunk space, it has a decent back seat, the overall ergonomics are good, the overall Porsche experience, the way things work, the fit and the finish and all of that stuff is wonderful. The seat, the 18-way is fantastic. So it's great to drive on a daily basis. And then you flip a couple switches and then you press sport mode and then you put it in its lowest setting and then you enable the exhaust and you get an engaging, sporty driving experience. Now, it's not going to feel like a sports car because you can't defy the laws of physics. This is a 4,400 pound car that sits up higher, but Porsche has done a wonderful job of tuning this thing to feel sporty. And Porsche, more than any other, I guess, luxury or expensive or German luxury sport, whatever you want to call it, brand, tunes that into almost all of their cars. Even when you drive a 6-cylinder Panamera or a base level Macan, it gives you proper feedback and proper sportiness. So you're gonna get a decent amount of engagement in a Porsche product, and even more so in this Macan. That exhaust note when you're upshifting and downshifting with the pops, it just sounds wonderful and it's very, very engaging to drive. Now, one of the things where I've read and heard online and watched videos on is the comparison when you start talking about the Macan and some other cars. Now, I've driven the X3M, and that car's engine feels a little bit more special than the V6. It just feels more lively, the inline 6-cylinder twin turbo. But nothing taken away from this. It's just that that inline 6 is a little bit better. And even some controversy inside of the Macan lineup. There's some talk out there that how much faster is the GTS than the Macan S, and is it really worth it to pay the extra premium? I believe it's about $15,000 to jump up to the GTS. I can't really comment on that. I've never driven the updated version of the Macan S with the same 2.9 liter engine, but I can tell you that this car is super, super fun to drive. And very, very engaging. But that's pretty much it. I'm not going to say much more. The Macan is a wonderful, wonderful SUV, and in this GTS trim level, it just feels all that much sportier than what you would get in a base Macan. So that's it. If you've got any other questions, please make sure you leave me a comment down below or send me a message on Instagram at DriveSteady. Otherwise, thank you for watching this video. Until next time, drive steady.